Good morning. This is Tim Selden. I'm president of the Montessori Foundation, and this is one of our Montessori Leadership Institute workshops. This is part of a series of 5 workshops on different aspects of recording and reporting on student progress. It is centered around an external product that we collaborated on its development, Montessori Compass. So I'll do a disclaimer right now. We are not owners of Montessori Compass Foundation. We support it, we believe in it, and we're fortunate that we got a hold of Rob and Anita Amos right at the time when they were first developing the product. We thought it was important because from our experience, every Montessori school is facing the need to do a better job of communicating with parents, not only about Montessori theory and Montessori philosophy, but specifically, how do we explain what's invisible, the intangible reality of what is going on inside of a Montessori classroom? What is their child getting from all that money they're spending to have them wash tables? The way these webinars work is, first off, I should warn you that they are being recorded. Assuming that all goes well and the recording doesn't crash, and hasn't crashed yet, at the end of the session I will prepare it for online streaming, and I'll send all of you, whether you attended the workshop today live or whether you signed up and for any reason had to miss it, I'll send you the link to the webinar. In the same time, I will send you the link to the previous webinars that have occurred thus far. This webinar is fairly long, and that's because we're organizing it for continuing education units. You should have all gotten information about how you can get a CEU, continuing education unit, from the local group that we work with here in Sarasota, Florida, which is the Sarasota Technical Institute. Anyone has any questions about that, you can email me privately after the session, but it should have been in your sign-up information. It will be 2 hours. We're going to take breaks every 20 minutes. We're going to encourage you to get up, get something to drink, stretch briefly, come back, sit back down. We're going to answer some of the questions that come in, and let's talk about how to ask questions. You're all on mute because there's more than 151 of you here today. And if we were to open up the microphone to everyone, we wouldn't be able to hear anything. The feedback loop would be horrible. So at the bottom of the panel that's on the right side of your screen, which is called GoToWebinar Control Panel, the bottom, you should see a thing called chat. And you can send messages to me by typing your message there. You can also ask questions. And a little bit higher on your screen, and yours may be closed, is one of those little open and close arrows. I see that Regina Satterwaite, for example, has asked a question, but what she's really said is, okay, great. So that's one way of communicating, and the chat is the other way, and either one of them works. You can also raise your hand. I can promise you, you probably won't see much from us initially because we're not going to stop every time you ask a question, but we will get to as many questions as we can during this live session. So without any further ado, I'm going to ask that we go to the next slide, and I'll give you an overview of what's happening. So what you're looking at now is a list of the topics we're going to cover. Rob, would you like to just break this up by introducing yourself and covering quickly what we're going to cover this week and next week?
Yeah, hi, my name is Rob Amos. I am one of the co-founders of Montessori Compass, along with my wife and partner, Anita Amos. We're going to be covering parent communication in 2 parts here. So the first part for this week, we're going to be covering some of the core aspects of the system, including messaging, calendar, photos. I'm going to give you a better sense for what type of access the parents have and what type of controls the schools have in place in order to customize the experience for the parent portal. And then when we get into next week, we're going to have a part 2 in the series because it's, believe it or not, it's going to run run well past 2 hours when we get into kind of what's involved with the progress reports and the activity reports and some of the other aspects of customizing the parent experience here. So that's what we'll be focusing on here today.
Terrific. And we're going to start with some theory, which I will cover next. So here we have parent communication in Montessori schools. And as you all know, parents want to know, what is my child getting out of Montessori? I'm spending all this money. All he seems to be doing is washing tables. He comes home every day. I ask, what did you do in school? And he says nothing, or I played, or I was on the playground, or something that doesn't give the average parent a lot of confidence. Montessori schools have a unique challenge. The first is, whether you're a free, public, or charter Montessori school, which is still the minority of Montessori schools, or whether you're running an independent Montessori school, you are something that the average parent does not necessarily come to with a great deal of confidence. There are parents who grew up in Montessori, have always wanted Montessori for their children. They show up on our doorsteps, and we wish we could clone them. There are other parents who we wish they would just drop their children off and never darken our doorstep. However you look at it, from a parent's point of view, it's very frustrating. It's very concerning because we're not like other schools. We talk this weird language. We obviously have an antipathy to testing when the rest of the world is fascinated with tests. We have homework that we don't give, where the rest of the school is proud of how much homework they give their children. In fact, the average parent looks at homework as evidence that learning must be going on because the kid has hours of homework. Now, obviously, there are individual parents that feel the opposite. We don't give grades. We may send home the occasional written report, but it certainly doesn't necessarily inspire confidence from the point of view of parents because it's often very generalized or uses some weird Montessori gobbledygook language like planes of development, prepared environment, sensorial, practical life. They don't get it. They don't get it, and they don't want to get it. From their point of view, you're simply the best preschool in town because your bathrooms don't stink, because your rooms are warm and inviting, because there isn't anything better. But the minute they find something better, an awful lot of our parents will drift away. And that's true from charter schools and public Montessori programs as well. We all have a tendency, unless we do the job really well, to bleed off kids along the way as parents leave us, not because they're necessarily unhappy, but they're not happy enough that they're comfortable taking the criticism, the questioning, the odd looks that parents have. My wife, Joyce, likes to remind me that as a lawyer, she was constantly nudged by fellow attorneys. What, you don't want your children to go to college? You know, you don't want your children to get a good education? Isn't Montessori that school where they can play and do anything they want all day long? They don't have to learn to read? Another real weakness from a typical parent point of view is we don't normally send home workbooks or ditto pages. There's nothing tangible that a parent can put their finger on. And by the way, if you do those things, you're probably caving into parent pressure, because we're not supposed to use workbooks and busy work. We're supposed to be doing high quality, highly intensive work that is very different from the fill in the blank worksheet. That doesn't mean that you can't use any and that you should be ashamed, but it's simply the reality is very few Montessori schools are anything like the typical equivalent of a traditional school. And we don't have honor rolls. We don't have student of the month. We don't have any of the things that in the typical public or independent school give people bragging rights and a sense of being in familiar territory. Rob, would you advance to the next slide? Thank you. So many of us, whether we're older men like this picture of someone like me, or whether you're a young woman or young man out there in the trenches working with children, we often feel like we're walking a tightrope or the razor's edge. On the one hand, we know that we're supposed to follow the child. We're supposed to allow them to pursue their own interests. We're supposed to throw out seeds of culture and see which ones blossom. On the other hand, there's the issue of, will the kids ever learn to read? Is there ever a time when we should be worried? And what I'd like to talk to you about for a few minutes is just a basic philosophy which leads to this. Now, I should start off with a disclaimer. I am, in general, very conservative when it comes to the issue of government interference with families' individual freedom of choice in schooling, or that creates centralized bureaucracies and rules and regulations and accountability and expectations. There are lots of people that disagree with me. I'm in the minority, so I'm just going to admit that right up front. However, having said that, we live in a world where the market is looking for some sort of tangible evidence. And if we don't have some way of providing that evidence to parents, they will usually vote with their pocketbook and their feet, and they'll go elsewhere. Not because they're unhappy. They probably will stay until they transfer from one classroom to the other. That's a great excuse for leaving. Or when public school is available for kindergarten, then we lose our third-year kids that are so vital to our classes. Or they'll leave as soon as the local independent school of their choice says either apply now or you'll never get an opening. And many of us talk about feeling frustrated that we're seeing our best families leave us, not because they're angry or unhappy, but simply because they feel like they have an obligation to take that next step to real school. So we have to find a way of convincing parents that what we're doing is real, meaningful, tangible. Same time, Montessori is generally not very tangible to parents. We can bring them in and we can give them lessons about how we teach geometry and let them have hands-on experience with the materials and do our journeys of discovery, if you're familiar with what that means, all of which are really good, but they're not in themselves enough. We obviously need a philosophy of curriculum. And this next slide is just one of my simplistic images that describes it. You know this already. Our curriculum doesn't separate language from math, from history, from geography, from economics. Everything is interconnected. And so the idea is any unit of study is not really separated into one field. So even our curriculum, which talks about the strands of mathematics, the strands of science, you and I know that these things are not really separated out. They're overlapping, they're interconnected, and this is yet another image to show it. I want to give you a moment just to look at that. That's a curriculum tapestry. So please, if you would, just take a look, see what's there, and notice the idea that what we've got is this fairly sophisticated curriculum that's different in some way from the normal attitudes about curriculum. I'm going to talk about those normal attitudes versus our attitude in philosophy in a minute. All right, I'm hoping you had a chance to study that. There'll be a test in just a moment. Hopefully you're doing a good job of teaching your 3-, and 4-, and 5-year-olds architecture and engineering and computer literacy. By the way, we don't recommend computers in general for children under 6. But that is a nice way or an image of how to think about our curriculum. So what's the difference? Traditional curriculum is not simplistic. It's changing. It's always dangerous to talk about traditional schools versus Montessori schools, but there are some big, broad, general conceptual differences. In general, when you look at a scope and sequence for a traditional school, whether it's a Lutheran school, a Catholic school, your local public school, generally speaking, they will have the curriculum that is taught to the children in kindergarten. And they'll tell you item by item by item, or week by week by week. They might have a scope and sequence. They certainly have one hidden behind the scenes if they don't share it with the public. But the idea is they've got a plan. And the plan is they're going to move the class starting on the first week of school through a predefined sequence of lessons and activities. The idea is everybody moves through that curriculum at the same pace. Because children aren't the same, some teachers, I'm old enough to remember the days of the Redbird and the Bluebird and the Robin group, some teachers traditionally have taken a class of 25 to 30 and separated them into some kind of groupings for those kids who are on grade level, a little behind, and a little ahead, with typically the code words like Robin, Bluebird, whatever, group 1, group 2, group 3. In today's schools, there are gifted programs or honors tracks, and they're the same idea. They're accelerated through the same basic curriculum. There may be some add-on to enrich it, and in a few cases you'll have a complete rewrite of the curriculum to not only advance what is taught to the 5-year-olds and pull down what would normally be taught a year or two later, but they may actually have written an entirely new curriculum. That's pretty rare. But the idea is still, we're going to move the group as a group. And some kids are going to excel, and they'll do more than we expect. Some kids will lag behind, and will send home notes to their parents that Johnny really ought to try harder. He's not living up to his potential. They may move a child from the honors track to a less honors track, a normal track, but the bottom line is they expect kids to move in a group. In Montessori, we assume a couple of things. The first is we assume that every child is different. We assume that not only is John Gardner right, that people learn in different ways, but we assume they learn in different paces. We're not the first people or the only people to care about differentiated instruction and individual continuous-paced learning, but Montessori is really gifted at doing it. So one of the things that's different in Montessori is we assume that kids will learn things in different paces. On the other hand, we talked about the razor's edge, and that's what I want to wrap up with on this concept. We do allow kids to move ahead as they're ready, and that's important. We would never say to a child, I'm sorry, you're 3 years old, this is for the 5-year-olds, you can't do it. What we do is we find out if the child is ready. If the child is ready, we allow him to proceed ahead. And even if he's not ready, we don't humiliate him or tell him he can't do it. We find some way of responding to his interest and curiosity. And that might be sensorial exploration of the material. However, we still have the idea that there are certain benchmarks. I mean, come on. You've got to have some idea of when a kid is going to learn to read. So, for example, when I took my Montessori training back when dinosaurs ruled the earth, we assumed that every child in the 3, 4, and 5-year-old class would learn to read before they were 5. They might not read fluently at the paragraph level. They might be still at the noun phrase level or very, very short phonetic word sentences, the Bob book type things. But we assumed that we were going to see real evidence of reading in almost every single child. We also assumed that by the end of the 3rd year, kindergarten, among other things, that children would have been introduced to the noun family, article, adjective, noun. That's what the farm game is for. We assume that they can read verbs and they would read and act out We assume that they can begin to work with adverbs, even if they don't know the term adverb. Walk quickly, hop high, various ways of describing actions, reading and doing, labeling things. And we assume that some of them have enough eye-hand control that they're beginning to write. And if they can't write with their paper and pencil, we kind of assume that they're beginning to do it with the movable alphabet. That's an example of a benchmark. Now, what are you going to do if a child doesn't hit that benchmark? Well, you're certainly not going to make him fail. You're going to assume that this child needs more time. But that doesn't mean we wait until the child shows interest. It means we continue to make every reasonable effort to capture the child's attention, to get the child engaged, and ultimately you've got a question. At what point are you going to step in and begin to manage the child? I call it walking the razor's edge because some people tend to jump in immediately and they grab the child and say, you can't go out to recess unless you do 3 math problems this morning. Other people basically say to children, good luck, do what makes you happy, let me know if you ever want to learn to read. Write if you ever get work. I'm suggesting to you that you want to have this all in balance. So that's probably a really good place to stop and take a break. And so what I'd like to ask all of you to do is get up and stretch and take 60 seconds and either stare at the screen if you want, or get up and do an exercise, or twist a little bit in a yoga pose, or go get yourself a glass of water. 60 seconds we're going to pick up and we're going to respond to some of these questions that I see that are coming in. Rob, how are you doing?
Hi, Tim. Rob is doing fine. Rob was muted there, so I was talking to myself for a brief moment until I realized that I was on mute to avoid the feedback. So I oftentimes talk to myself, so it's not an unusual occurrence.
By the way, Sue Wagner has asked, is the curriculum Tapestry available to use with our parents? Sue, just for you. Absolutely. Rob, I'll send that to you, and you can add that in as a one of the resources for teachers within Montessori Compass.
Sure. As a quick sidebar, that's an area of the site that we're going to be building up over the next month or two in advance of the new school year. Is a new parent resources center, which we'll be spending some time talking about, and also a teacher resources center. And they'll have this sort of stuff in there for different types of resources.
Thank you to Susan Key, who says, can we get a printed copy of the Tapestry? It's beautiful. Thanks, Susan. I'm going to give credit to a very dear friend of mine, Rianne Eisler, who actually created that image for her book, Tomorrow's Children. And if you haven't read that book, it's really beautiful. It's another way of explaining Montessori to the really well-educated parent who wants to understand it but doesn't want the Montessori gobbledygook. So yes, we won't send you a printed copy, but within Montessori Compass you'll be able to download that as a resource and print it out locally. My goodness, is it true that that's all the questions that have come in? I don't see any at all. I also don't see any polls that are associated. I thought I had created a poll. So let me see if there's anyone that has any other questions they want to ask. I don't see any hands being raised. Oh, wait, I do. I see Judith Martin. I'm gonna unmute Judith Martin, and if she's there, and invite her to ask her question. Hi, Judith. Whoa. Getting quite an echo there for a minute. Judith, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hi, what's your question?
Oh, no, I didn't have a question. I don't know what happened.
Oh, it's okay. Thanks. Judith is muted again. I see that Sue Wagner has her hand up. And I don't know. Now she doesn't. And I see that Hans de Barros does. So I'm going to unmute Hans. Hans, did you have a question?
Yes, hello, Steve.
Hello.
Yes, just want to know if you have trainings here in Asia, somewhere near Philippines.
You're asking if we have trainings for Montessori?
Yes.
Hans, write me separately, and I'll try to help you out, okay?
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I just joined in.
It's okay. Don't worry. By the way, for those of you who, Rob, would you mute yourself? Because we're getting your echo. Thank you. I don't see if anyone else actually has a question, so I'm going to say if anyone has one, would you use the question or question area or the chat? Let's see if anyone has anyone. Terry Broman Little says you're talking us through it. No questions yet. And there's an echo in your voice, Sonia Jane, and I know, I'm sorry. That's my friend Rob, whose children destroyed his headset. So normally it's fine because when I'm talking and he's got his mic on, then you can hear the echo. And Sonia, you say that it's worse when multiple people, and you're right. It's absolutely, and thank you. Yes, laugh out loud. Okay, any other questions from anyone? Hearing none, I guess we'll move on. So the next thing I want to talk to you all about before we get into the meat and potatoes of Montessori Compass is parent education today. I don't need to tell you, since we're all sitting here using internet technology to be virtually present in the same room, that parents today are wired. They live with their smartphone. They're inundated with emails and text messages, and the average parent says they're busy. They're very, very busy. I find an awful lot of parents are scanners. Whoops. I must have moved to another slide. Forgive me. So we know that people are very busy. I'm going to talk to you for a minute about three groups of parents. Now, some of you heard me say this before. Not, please don't be offended, especially if you are yourself a parent. There's typically in most Montessori schools three groups. This is true in the biggest, the oldest, the most prestigious and established, and the youngest and the smallest and the newest. The first group are the true believers. They are the people who are really on board with you. They read everything you send out. They read about Montessori. They go on YouTube. They're looking at the thousands of videos whenever they can. They know who Steve Hughes is. They know who Tim Selden is. They know all kinds of stuff. They know the alphabet soup of Montessori. They want to know what's the difference between AMS and AMI, not realizing there's at least 15 different organizations not included in the names AMS and AMI. Those are true believers. They actually care. Now, by the way, they can be critics. If they think you're not living up to your ideals, if they think you're being inconsistent, they can really challenge you on it a lot. And they may be a bit demanding. They may really expect a lot from you. And they may not really understand Montessori, but they're paying attention. I would suggest to you that group of parents is engaged. That's your core group. And you really, really, really want to love them and appreciate them. If you could, you'd have every parent in the school like that. Then on the shell, out there, way far around the campfire. You're around the campfire. You're singing campfire songs, kumbaya. Those core group of parents are swinging with you. They're having a great time. Outside in the dark is a group of parents who some people call the drop-off dragons. Some people call them the parking lot mafia. This is a group of parents who are sarcastic, cynical, critical. They really don't think Montessori works, and you really wonder, why the devil are you here? These are people who are on their way out. Now, by the way, true believers, the people who are really with you, they can be critics. They can really disagree with what a teacher is doing, or a head of school is doing, or a school is doing. But they want it to work. The difference is that the outside group is a group that doesn't think Montessori works. They think it's all a load of hooey. And you really wonder, what are they doing there? Why that's important is those people are incredibly influential within your school community. And when they leave, as they surely will, they will take 2 or 3 people with them. And they can devastate a school. And by the way, there's not much you can do about it, because every school has them. And when they leave, you'll discover that new ones will rise to the surface. In most schools, if you're lucky, you've got a core group of 10% that really are with you. It's unlikely that you've got 10% on the outer fringe, the parking lot mafia. Usually it's 3 to 5%. It can be greater or less at any given year. But those 2 groups are the ones that get our attention. The majority of parents is the group in the middle. Those are people who are just not that into you. They like you, they're not unhappy, they appreciate you, they're thankful, but they are not Montessori parents, not Montessori anything. They will be just as active and engaged if they transfer to the local Catholic school. They'll be just as engaged in the neighborhood public school. They're not specifically oriented to Montessori or to any of the values that supposedly Montessori stands for. They are simply there because they love their children, and because you love their children and their children are happy, and the minute their children stop being happy, they will be out of there in a heartbeat. Even if their children are happy, if there's a realistic alternative and they say, okay, I can immediately drop $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000. There are schools that cost $25,000 US a year. Now the average is closer to 5 to 10 would be the normal range, but there are exceptions. From their point of view, a parent has to be really committed to spend money on your school when they could go to another school for free, or they could go to a private school that's probably much more prestigious, much more familiar looking and sounding, no risk about it at all, and there's actually some bragging rights. There's prestige. Oh, you send your child to the Concord School? Oh, wow, he must be very bright. You must be doing really well. You must be very proud. Those are bragging right kinds of issues. So the average parent in our schools, they're not that into us. They're very busy. They don't usually want to come out at night. They don't really necessarily want to come out during the day. In fact, the truth is they don't want to be educated. The average parent resents the phrase parent education. It makes them sound like they're stupid, and they resent feeling stupid. So they certainly don't want a 25-year-old who doesn't have kids telling them, if they're 35 to 45 and a law degree or they're managers of a bank, they don't want to be lectured to about how to raise their child and about why they ought to have their baby in a low bed. By the way, it doesn't mean I don't think you should try. I'm just telling you how they feel, which is they don't necessarily understand or appreciate it. And that's why most of us find at the beginning of the school year we'll get a much higher attendance, and as the months go by, we see fewer and fewer and fewer until it's typically 2 or 3 people, the same 2 or 3 who show up to everything. That's your parking lot mafia. That's your core group that really comes out for everything and really, really is hungry for more information. So one of the issues today is we've got to figure out new and better strategies, and that's really part of what we're talking about today. We're living in a wired world. These parents live by their smartphone or their iPad or their desktop or their laptop or their BlackBerry, and they're inundated with communication. And they will unsubscribe to a email list, even though they know they better not do it. They'll unsubscribe anyway if they're angered by something you send them. So the typical parent will only look at something for a second, 5-second scanners. They don't read long books, not most of them. They don't want to be lectured late at night for an hour. And you've got to figure out how do you reach out and get their attention. It's tricky, and everybody struggles to do this. So how do we engage? Well, we need to build community. Building community is not simply throwing parties. Building community begins with admissions. Looking for parents who, at the start, even if they can't pronounce Montessori, they want something just like you. They're hungry for it. Too many of us try to make parents love us. We try to convince them they're making the biggest mistake of their life if they pull out. They think we're nuts. They think we're a cult. They resent it. They're not necessarily part of a community. What you're looking for is people who want a community, who really want a relationship with their child's school, and they really, of all the schools they could choose, they like yours. By the way, they're not usually loyal to Montessori. They're loyal to you, to your school. More practically, they're loyal to an individual teacher, which can be a real problem if that teacher leaves you to go to another school or isn't there next year because she's moved to another city or goes out on medical leave. Engagement is like keeping a romance alive. It's the small, unexpected things, the small gestures, the card, the little note in a lunchbox that says, I love you, the flowers when it's not expected. Some of you are really excellent with that, but it can't be said often enough that when you get parents in the school, that's when you have to really start working at building the relationship up. By the way, while you're at it, it's the best time to get parents informed about Montessori is not when they're in your school. And it's not even when they're making the decision to stay or not stay for kindergarten or elementary. The best time to slam information home is when they're in the application process. And for most schools, they tend to do this in 1 or 2 visits. And of course, in 1 or 2 visits, a parent barely knows how to pronounce your name, no less really has listened to anything you've said. So I'm suggesting that all of you go slow, that you learn more and more about the process of developing relationships with schools. We teach lots of courses about this, and it's only a small part of what we're going to cover today. But small gestures are important. And finally, frequent communication. I'll give you a story. My daughter Chelsea is 31. She's a busy professional. She has a PhD in clinical psychology. She's the mother of 2 young kids. In January, she had her kids on waiting lists for spots that were impossible to get in a Montessori school in the Baltimore, Maryland area. Her nanny quit, gave her a week's notice. All of a sudden, she's got 2 kids. She's got an 18-month-old and a 10-week-old. And she's got a busy job. And she has nobody to care for these kids. Well, we scrambled, and I used every connection I had, and we were able to find a place at a wonderful school in Columbia, Maryland, Love of Learning, which is one of the great schools of Maryland. Love of Learning is family friendly. That means that they behave not only like a Montessori school, but like a child care center. They're open early, they're closed late, they don't take a lot of holidays, they're designed for working parents. But the thing that really got Chelsea's attention, and has held it ever since she went there, that I want to share with you today is this. The very first hour those kids were there, remember, my grandson Hudson was 10 weeks old. Jackson was 18 months old. These were really small kids. Within 1 hour, Both sets of teachers had sent Chelsea and her husband Mark emails with photographs and very short messages about how things were going. Photographs of those kids in the classroom. They reached out and touched Chelsea. That's powerful. Now, after the first hour, what the teachers do is every day they try to write something about what the kids are doing. Nothing much. It's usually just a sentence or two or a phrase or two. But they use a lot of photographs and even once in a while a short video that they'll upload to YouTube, make private, and put the link in an email. Bottom line is that what they're doing is they're creating engagement, and they're doing this communication outreach on essentially a daily basis. That's powerful. Rob, would you go to the next slide? Well, would you go back? And this particular slide, just take a moment to make sense out of it. Go back. That slide's just for a little humor. This is bragging rights in a typical school. Hopefully you can all see it. Just in case you can, it's the schedule on the bulletin board of a preschool. It says 9 o'clock circle time, 10 o'clock art fun, 11 o'clock is snack, and at 12 o'clock we do SAT prep. That's Scholastic Aptitude, or the college admissions test in the U.S. And they're preparing children who are obviously 3, 4, 5 for SAT. Next slide. So, Rob, let me turn this over to you.
All right, thanks, Tim. So we're going to talk to you a little bit today about some of the ways to bridge the communication gap between home and school, and how Montessori Compass can really be a practical solution to that. So there's three main pillars to Montessori Compass. We've covered some of this already in prior sessions. So first and foremost, Montessori Compass is really a user-friendly record-keeping system for recording all your activity in the classroom. We also have a variety of school management features as well. And lastly, we have the parent communication features. For parent communication, what we're going to be talking about today, there's a couple of key aspects to that. Number one, we give you the ability to have a centralized portal for sharing information with parents. So that way all the parents have a centralized calendar, so they always know what's going on with the school. You have the ability to message them directly or send out group messaging. You can share photos. You can share progress reports and things of that nature. But having a centralized place to go for parents is really valuable. I'm a parent of 4 young children myself, so I know what it's like to be a minivan chauffeur, going from school to karate to dance class and t-ball games and soccer and all that sort of stuff, constantly running around in different directions, and really having centralized portals so we can kind of really keep our heads screwed on straight with what's happening at school is very, very valuable from a parent's perspective. And next, you can really use the parent communication to really reassure them that there's some serious academic and social development, happening in the classroom. That's done via whether you can utilize our daily or weekly activity reports, or our more comprehensive progress reports, or just even through sharing photos of things that are going on in the classroom. There's a lot of different ways of sharing what's going on as far as the academic and social development in the classroom. You can certainly use it to build a sense of community so that parents can connect with one another, and they can organize the PTO meetings and the play dates and the birthday parties and all that sort of activity so they can all kind of get to know each other. And then also, lastly, really, this is a goal that we really share in common with the Montessori Foundation and Tim, is the idea of creating more of an awareness and appreciation and just a general understanding of Montessori. I think back to when I was a brand new parent and my son was 18 months old and we were just starting out. I didn't know anything about Montessori. There's a real learning curve for new parents, and our goal through a lot of what we're trying to do here in collaboration with Tim and the Foundation is to improve upon that, is to get parents to understand what's going on in a Montessori classroom, and we think there's a lot of long-term benefits for your school and for Montessori as a whole. So let's talk about some of the communication features that we have. First off, it's important to know that Montessori Compass does not share anything with parents without the school's approval. You have to opt in to everything that I'm about to tell you in terms of parent communication. Schools are always in 100% control over the experience that parents have with Montessori Compass. We have schools that absolutely love parent communication and use our tool to its fullest extent. We have other schools that just decided they would prefer to kind of take some baby steps and use it for record keeping and keep it private, and then they turn on parent communication features as they go. So it really is a personal choice. First off, we're going to talk about the Communication Center, which can be found in the backpack of your Montessori Compass account. So you can start sending off invitations to parent or guardian users. You can also send it out to staff members as well by going into here and selecting who you want to send it off to. And this is what they will get. Greetings, Cheryl. We'd like to invite you to join Montessori Compass. Please click here. And when the parent clicks there, they will be automatically taken into Montessori Compass, and they'll be prompted to change their password. The default password is always password, and you can manually change it for them, or they can just be prompted to change it when they log in for the first time. So they change it to something private, whatever they want, and now they're in. Moving forward, the next thing you want to determine is how you wish to use the email notifications. Again, by default, out of the box, when you first set up your account, there are no email notifications. There's no parent communication whatsoever. You need to turn this stuff on. So you have the option to choose daily or weekly email notifications. And that doesn't mean that we email every single time anything's put into Montessori Compass. We send them out an email and they end up with 52 emails at the end of the day, because parents would quickly tune out. What we do is send out a digest email that looks a little bit like this, where you can determine what time of day it gets sent out. Let me actually go back to the prior slide. It says email notifications, and you can choose the time of day that you want to set that up. Most times people set that up for, say, 6 p.m. to correspond with the end of the school day. And it'll give you a summary of the activity of anything that is new in the past 24 hours. It's important to note that only the content that has been entered prior to this time is going to be included. So if I haven't completed my record keeping, or I haven't sent out the messages that I wanted to send, or the photos I wanted to share in advance of, in this example, 6 p.m., they're not going to receive this information here. And if you don't have anything new that has been recorded prior to 6 p.m., no email notification goes out at all. So we strongly recommend that you choose a send time that's going to work for you, whether it's 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 9 p.m., whenever you want to do it, where you're pretty sure you're going to get everything out that you want to get out for that day. And then what the email notification does is it really serves as a way of nudging parents and reminding them that, hey, you got some new stuff in here to look at, click here to log in. Now, we have all types of analytics as to how people use Montessori Compass. Typically, the way parents will consume this information is parents are, they're all carrying around their iPhone or their Android smartphone or whatever, and they'll see that come in real time. If you send it out 6 p.m. at 6:01, they're typically looking at it, and they can go ahead and see that there's some new information from their school, and they go ahead and click on it, and then they can go ahead and consume the information. And for parents that interact with Montessori Compass on their smartphone, you can just click a Remember Me on the login, and it'll just automatically take you in real time. And a lot of parents actually just keep a tab open in their browser, whether you're using Safari on an iPhone or Chrome on an Android device or whatever, and you can just go ahead and always have it open and refresh and so forth. But this is the chief way that most parents are reminded to go into Montessori Compass to get more information. You can see it shows the next 2 weeks of activities and new messages, and there's some new photos and so forth. Moving forward, we looked at this one already. So another one of our, you will no longer force us to put our toys away. The Count of Montessori. Not sure. I don't think this is a part of Montessori Compass. We'll go ahead and move forward here. I don't remember that being in the software. All right. Messaging. All right, so messaging is a really nice way of communicating with members of your school, and we're going to get into kind of the nuts and bolts of what that looks like and the different best practices and so forth. But again, this is how you set things up. Our philosophy with everything from the minute we started building Montessori Compass years ago was that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to running a school. We reckon that we work with schools from every corner of the world, and we feel very fortunate to have that opportunity to serve all these different types of schools. And everybody does things their own unique way. So, our philosophy is that you should not have to adapt the way that you run your school to our software. It's really incumbent upon us as software developers to give you a variety of tools, a smorgasbord of different types of tools and features and benefits, and give you the ability to customize them to meet the specific needs of your school. So here's an example with the messaging feature. Would you like your teachers to be able to message parents directly? Yes or no? We have some schools that absolutely want teachers to do that. We have other schools who only want school administrators to communicate with parents. So it's a yes or no option there. Would you like parents to communicate directly with other parents? Yes or no? Again, some schools love that. Some other schools, that makes them a bit queasy to think of parents communicating with one another. And then we also have a student directory, which it doesn't share any private information. There's no phone numbers or addresses or things like that. What it does, it just it gives you a list of names and the students. So I can think of my daughter's having a birthday in 2 weeks, and she wants to invite Susie and Sarah to her birthday party. I have no idea who Susie and Sarah are, but I can find them in this directory, and I can send a message out to their parents. And that can be actually a time saver from the school's perspective, because I'm not coming to the teacher and saying, hey, who the heck are Susie and Sarah? Or, hey, can you pass out these birthday party invitations? Or if I'm planning a PTO meeting or anything along those lines, giving parents to be able to message each other back and forth can be helpful if you're comfortable with that. These are options that are available to you. So here's what a parent account that would have limited options. So if I say that I do not want parents to message parents to be able to message other parents, now this is what this would look like from their perspective. So I'm logged into a parent. I've turned off the ability for parents to talk to each other, but all they can do is go ahead and communicate with the school staff. So I see school administrators and teachers and so forth. I also don't have my parent directory enabled in the upper right corner here. It stops at progress reports. If I had my directory turned on, that icon would be available. Now let me go ahead and show you what it looks like for a parent that has a directory. You can see that now in the upper right corner. That's available to them. And you can see that I can message these other parents. I see Martin Bird and Margaret Simpson and Ellis Crawford. These are other parents. I can talk to them directly. I can send them a message, and I can talk to them about whatever I want. Parents are not able to send out messages to entire groups or the whole school or anything like administrators or teachers can, but they can message people directly. So it's just a comfort level, whatever you're comfortable with. This is what the school directory looks like. So if I'm in a classroom here, you can see in the upper right corner, there's a drop down that says primary room. This is a classroom. And I'm looking at all the students in the classroom. On the left side in the column, we see Maria and John and William and Avery. Those are all students. So if my daughter wants to invite Maria, Avery, and Juliana to her birthday party, I can see, well, Maria's mom, her name's Mary. Let me go ahead and send her a message through Montessori Compass. So that would be the purpose of that. Or if I want to organize a PTO meeting, I can go ahead and send these out, or fundraising committees and all the different types of activities that parents might need to engage one another with. Moving forward, we have a tab in here for calendar to customize the calendar experience. Now, by default, when you plan your lessons in advance, whether that's a day in advance or a month in advance, that'll go ahead and be displayed on a calendar that's for the classroom. So that is something that parents have access to. You can choose to make those available to parents or to not. So if you want parents to know what the students are going to be working on tomorrow, then you can go ahead and say yes. If you do not want the parents to know what the parents are working on tomorrow and next week, click no. So again, no one-size-fits-all approach. Use it however you see fit. This is what will appear on a calendar for an individual student. So if I'm going to go ahead and plan a lesson for Maria, you see I have Maria's name checked off there. There's a description that is optional and can be shown in the parent calendar. So I can say Maria has grasped multiplication with the golden beads, and we'll be working on multiplication with the stamp game. That's a custom lesson that I planned just for this one child, and I wrote that custom description to share with the parent in the calendar. That is using the calendar to the max there. That's certainly not a requirement and not something that would be necessary to do, but you have the option to do that. Something for the entire class that's more general. I selected all of my students for this group lesson, and now you see students will be celebrating this special day by creating collaborative art projects. This is more general in scope, and it's available to be seen on the calendar for everybody. And this is how it shows up. So you can see on Tuesday we have the stamp game, and there's that comment about Maria, and there's that geography lesson, and there's that more general comment. So that's how it can appear to parents if you wish to enable that feature. Again, fully optional, customize it however you see fit. Moving forward, activity reports. I'm going to breeze through this really quickly because this is kind of a big topic that we're going to be covering, and we're going to be discussing this in more detail next week. But activity reports are daily or weekly summaries of a child's progress in the classroom on either a given day or a given week. You can choose daily or weekly or not at all. You can also choose to customize it by including record keeping or not including record keeping. But that's all I'm going to say about that for right now. Here's another one of our cartoons. Very good, Clark. Now put it back where you found it. The Smallville Montessori. That's an interesting one. All right.
All right. Hang on a second, Rob. I think the cartoon's a good chance for a quick break because we're now approaching our second hour. So would you all get up and stretch for a moment or two, do a deep knee bend or a downward dog or Savasana or whatever you do. My dog Bikram looks like he's died. He looks like roadkill. He's just sitting here so tired after an hour of this workshop. I'm going to put a poll up on the screen, and I invite you to take a look at it and to respond. So hang on. Here we go. Here's the first one. How often do you communicate with your parents? So this is now open, and if you all start participating, we will see the results begin to come in. Let's see. I'm seeing numbers. I'm seeing monthly. I'm seeing weekly. I'm seeing 2 or 3 times a week. 2 or 3 times a week is ahead. 2 or 3 times a year is at the tail end of the pack. Looks like a lot of people communicate 2 or 3 times a week. A lot of people also weekly. I feel like I'm announcing a horse race. Anyway, in a moment or two, when folks have stopped responding, I will post this for you all to be able to see. Hopefully you guys are enjoying yourselves. In the meantime, I'm going to look at some of the questions that have come in, and I'll invite Rob and Anita to unmute themselves. Let's see. Rob, if you would go ahead. I think you're unmuted. We have a question here from Sonia asking if there's a Montessori Compass plugin that I can include on our website as well so that parents can log in right from our website. I sent a response to everybody saying that I thought you folks would be happy to send them an image that their web designer could put on the website and maybe some simple instructions as to how to turn that into a hot link.
Yeah, sure. So there's a couple of different options. You can contact us directly about that, and we'll give you some of those options. You can do something as simple as just linking directly to our login page. So I'm not on my own computer. There's that darn Apple update thing again. All right. So if you go to you can go directly to our login page, and you can hang on just a second here. Others the poll. Nita, I'm not on my computer. I apologize.
Rob, how about we'll just send that to everyone as an email?
Yeah, that'll be great.
I got another really good question. Melissa Plunkett says, do teachers... Rob, mute yourself for a sec, will you?
Yep.
Do teachers directly... Sorry? There, he's muted. Do teachers directly use these features, such as messaging, or do many heads of schools want to pre-approve any messages that are sent to parents? And I would add, is that even possible? Is that built in so that an administrator could do that? So I'm going to mute myself. Rob and Anita, please come on back in and respond.
I'm sorry, Tim. It was cutting off a second for me. Could you just go ahead and sum that up again for me?
Sure. The question is, when teachers are sending messages out to their class, can the administrator see what they're saying before they send it out? Can they see it out after? Can they see what has been said after? Can they pre-approve them? And what are the administrator's options? A lot of schools like to proofread whatever the teachers are sending home.
Okay. Well, I think since we're looking at a cartoon that's, I believe, related to Superman, if I'm not mistaken, we got Clark and we got Smallville. I believe that's Superman. I can use another comic book analogy. So from Spider-Man, which my kids love, there's a line that says, "With great power comes great responsibility," to the young guy who becomes Spider-Man. If you're going to give your teachers the ability to communicate with parents, again, these are all tools that we make available. You don't have to use any of them. You can customize them to meet the specific needs of your school. So you need to, as a school administrator, you just have to kind of lay some ground rules for how those things are going to be used. You could certainly just make sure that any communication that goes out the door, that the school administrator, the head of school, or whomever is deemed appropriate is CC'd on all this communication, so you can see everything that goes out the door. There are areas that if you're using our parent communication feature in the daily dashboard, where an administrator would be able to log in and see everything that went out the door that day. But there's certainly, if you're going to give teachers the ability to communicate directly with parents, and certainly parents the ability to communicate with other parents, there's really nothing you can do about that. If you give if you make these tools available, there has to be some trust in terms of what is said. So the answer really lies into how you choose to use the tools that we make available, and how you go ahead and set that up within your own school. So I'm not sure if that really answers your question, but there's no way to really, other than just insisting that any message that goes out has maybe there's some sort of approval process, or the administrator gets CC'd, or anything along those lines. That would be the way.
Or you could threaten them and say, we will wash your mouth out with soap. I have another question, this one from Sonia Jane. Is the student directory restricted to just the classroom that a parent is part of, or can they see the entire school directory?
So I believe it's the entire directory. I just want to confirm that. It's not, yes, sure, yeah. So yeah, you can see the entire directory for all the classrooms.
Okay.
And again, that information is limited. There's no email addresses, there's no phone numbers, there's no addresses. It's just name of student, name of the parents, and you can go ahead and kind of see who's who and choose to contact them if you see fit.
Okay. By the way, Melissa says that she can't see a poll, and I'm not quite sure why it didn't come up on my screen. A quick poll just literally popped up covering Rob's screenshot. And it would help me if you folks could send me a little confirmation as to whether or not you're seeing it. I can see that more than 70% of all of the 151 of you have voted, and I'll give it another moment or two before I close it. But I think that I can tell you at this point the overwhelming majority of people seem to communicate either weekly or 2 or 3 times a week. And I see votes are still coming in, so I won't close it yet. And let me just see if there's anything else that we want to cover before. I've got people saying they can't see the poll. It could be that on your screen, on that little tab on the right that says go to meeting control panel on your screen, folks, there's a thing on mine that says polls, and it could be you've got to open that up. But on my screen, it literally popped right open. How about you and Anita, Rob? Did it pop open on your screen? Don't know. Okay, and lastly, I see a question from Sally Amagai. I think I'm pronouncing it right, Sally. You're asking about next week that we're going to have more, and you want to know if you can see it. Sally, the way to be sure of that is when you get the invitation, go ahead and sign up. If you sign up, then you know you're going to get the registration. It's best to register and not attend than it would be to assume that we'll remember to send it to you separately. So it's okay. Looks to me like maybe time to close the polls, and I'm going to do that. 75% of you voted, and I'm going to share the results. I don't know if you can see that. But if you can see that 35% of you said you communicate with your parents weekly, and 30% of you said 2 or 3 times a week. Only 14% of you say you communicate either daily or more than once a day. And on behalf of Chelsea, and I humbly stand corrected, my daughter Chelsea, who teaches me, those who communicate as often as once a day, they're the big winners. That's what people are looking for. And it's not that you have to do it, and it's not that you should see it as a burden, but if you can figure out a way to reach out and touch your parents once a day, even if it's one thing sent to the entire group, you will become a winner. And if you don't do it every day, every time you remember, up to the point where you actually become annoying to them, you're going to get more street creds, more confidence, more connectiveness with your parents. Parents are looking for tangible evidence. All right, I'm going to hide the results. And Rob,